The cuffs bit into his wrists. In the middle of a crowded airport, a black man stood accused, humiliated, silent. The officer's voice dripped with arrogance. The passengers looked away. But before the flight ever took off, the terminal would rise to its feet and salute the very man they thought was guilty. An ordinary checkpoint. An ordinary day. But when prejudice spoke louder than truth, one man's dignity was put in chains. What no one expected was that the same crowd who looked away would soon rise, one by one, to salute him. This is the story of how arrogance crumbled and dignity prevailed. The airport was alive with the rhythm of movement. Luggage wheels clattered over polished tiles, echoing like the percussion of an orchestra no one had rehearsed. Announcements spilled from ceiling speakers, some sharp, some muffled, always urgent. Families tugged children by the hand, business travelers marched with brisk purpose, and first-time flyers tilted their heads back, wide-eyed at the sheer size of the place. And then, there was Marcus Cole. He wasn't the loudest or the fastest. He didn't draw attention with bright clothes or rushing footsteps. He moved with a kind of quiet purpose, shoulders squared beneath a simple jacket, a duffel bag slung over one arm. He looked like a man on a mission, because he was. Marcus's mother was in a hospital bed 3 states away. Heart surgery. Complications. The phone call he received the night before had replayed in his mind every few minutes since. Marcus. Her voice had been weak but steady. Don't you worry about me. Just get here safe. Safe. That was what she said. She probably didn't realize how loaded that word had become. Safe meant something different to Marcus, because experience had taught him that safety wasn't guaranteed. Not in combat zones overseas, and not in the country he called home. He checked the time on the digital display above the security gate. Still early. He hadn't eaten since yesterday evening, but his appetite was gone. All he wanted was to pass through this airport, board his plane, and walk into that hospital room while his mother was still awake, still able to recognize him. That thought, the fear that she might not, kept his pace steady. He joined the security line. Dozens of travelers ahead of him, dozens behind. He stood tall but not rigid, adjusting the strap of his duffel as the line inched forward. The overhead lights glared too bright, bouncing off the white tiles, the chrome stanchions, the glossy advertisements plastered along the walls. And then he felt it. A gaze. Heavy. Lingering. He didn't look immediately. Marcus had been taught, by his mother, by the streets, by the service, to measure his reactions. But he felt it. The way a man feels when someone isn't just looking at him, but through him, like a hunter studying prey. Finally, his eyes shifted. Officer O'Connor. The badge glinted on his chest, but Marcus didn't need it to know what kind of man he was. He recognized the stance, the puffed-up posture, the scanning eyes that always seemed to rest a little too long on people like him. Marcus had seen men like O'Connor in uniform before, different uniforms, different countries. The kind of men who wielded authority not as a shield for others, but as a weapon for themselves. O'Connor's gaze locked with Marcus's. No words exchanged. Not yet. But the message was there. I see you. And I'm already deciding what you are. Marcus adjusted his bag again, exhaling slowly through his nose. He told himself what his mother always told him. Don't argue with them. Show them. The line moved. Shoes came off. Belts slid through trays. Laptops unfolded. Marcus followed each step, calm, controlled. He placed his bag on the belt, slipped off his jacket, stepped through the scanner. Beep. Clear. But O'Connor wasn't interested in clear. He was interested in control. Sir, the officer's voice cut through the din. Step aside. Marcus turned, meeting his eyes. Is there a problem? Random check, O'Connor said, though nothing in his tone suggested randomness. Marcus hesitated. Not because he had anything to hide, he didn't. But because he recognized the moment for what it was. A test. An assertion. The first stone in a wall that might grow higher with each passing second. Bag, O'Connor said. On the table. Hands where I can see them. People nearby shifted uncomfortably. A mother pulled her child closer. A businessman glanced up, then quickly backed down at his phone. That silence, the silence of witnesses unwilling to intervene, spread like fog. Marcus placed the bag on the table. I've got a flight to catch, he said quietly. My mother's in the hospital. Please make this quick." But O'Connor's eyes narrowed, lips curling in something close to satisfaction. He unzipped the bag with deliberate slowness, rummaging through clothes, toiletries, a folded book. Nothing unusual. Nothing suspicious. Still, when the bag yielded nothing, O'Connor's frown deepened. Authority hates being proven wrong. And when arrogance meets resistance, it doesn't admit mistake, it escalates. "Turn around," O'Connor ordered. "Hands behind your back." Gasps rippled through the line. A young woman covered her mouth. An elderly man muttered under his breath. But no one stepped forward. Marcus's chest tightened. Not in fear. He'd felt fear before, under mortar fire, in enemy territory. This was different. This was humiliation. Still, he obeyed. Slowly, calmly, because he knew how quickly calm could be mistaken for defiance, how quickly defiance could be twisted into threat. The metal cuffs bit into his wrists with a sharp click. Cold. Final. And just like that, Marcus Cole, decorated soldier, devoted son, was paraded before strangers as a suspect, guilty of nothing more than existing in the wrong skin at the wrong gate. The cuffs clicked shut, the sound sharper than the chatter around them. For Marcus, it was more than metal on bone. It was the weight of history pressing on his skin. He stood motionless, shoulders squared, eyes steady. Years of discipline had trained him for moments like this, moments when everything inside screamed to resist, but wisdom said otherwise. The line of travelers had fallen quiet. Children tugged on their parents' coats, whispering questions. Parents shushed them. A businessman glanced at Marcus, then at the officer, then looked away, pretending his phone required urgent attention. Silence became complicity, thick and heavy, filling the Terminal A. O'Connor's grip tightened on Marcus's arm. "You think you can just walk through here, without me noticing? You think looking calm makes you innocent?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence was not weakness, it was control. He had been in interrogation rooms overseas where silence kept men alive. He knew the power of words unsaid. But to O'Connor, silence was defiance. "You got ID. Are you hiding something?" Marcus kept his voice low, even. "My wallet's in the bag you just tore apart." O'Connor sneered. "Convenient." The officer turned Marcus toward the crowd, as if parading a trophy. And for a few moments, that might have been the end of it. Another black man cuffed in an airport, another group of strangers too nervous or too numb to interfere. The humiliation would have gone unchallenged, the silence left unbroken. But then, it happened. A young TSA agent, barely older than 20, froze mid-step. His eyes landed on Marcus. Recognition flickered, then widened, spreading across his face like a spark catching flame. He whispered to the officer beside him. That officer turned, looked, and stiffened. His lips parted, his brow furrowed, and then, almost instinctively, his hand rose. Fingers pressed together, palm firm, his arm cutting a clean line to his temple. A salute. It was sharp, respectful, and it hung in the air like thunder without sound. O'Connor frowned, confused. "What are you doing?" The young agent swallowed hard. His voice trembled, but it carried. "That man, that Sergeant Marcus Cole." The words rippled outward. Heads turned. Conversations halted. Passengers craned their necks. The agent's voice grew steadier. "Silver Star recipient. 2 tours in Kandahar. Carried 6 men out of enemy fire. Saved lives when nobody thought they'd make it." The silence broke. Another TSA agent saluted. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the checkpoint transformed. A line of blue shirts stood in unison, arms raised, saluting the man still bound in cuffs. Gasps erupted. Then whispers. Then applause. First hesitant, then swelling. People clapped, shouted. Some even stood on chairs to see over the crowd. A woman wiped her eyes. A veteran in civilian clothes raised his fist in solidarity. The terminal had flipped. The suspect was now the hero. The officer, once in control, was now exposed under the weight of truth. O'Connor's grip faltered. His eyes darted nervously from the saluting agents to the clapping passengers. His voice, once loud, stumbled. This is... Marcus lifted his head. Calm. Steady. His voice was clear enough for everyone to hear. Is this your definition of safety, officer? Is this your definition of justice? The question cut sharper than the cuffs ever had. O'Connor opened his mouth, but no sound came. The young agent stepped forward, his salute unwavering. Sir, with respect, you handcuff him. Now. The applause swelled louder. Phones recorded every second. Strangers shouted in support. O'Connor's hand trembled as he reached for the key. The cuffs clicked open, falling away, clattering onto the floor with a sound that echoed like judgment. Marcus rubbed his wrists lightly, then let his hands fall. He didn't gloat, didn't sneer. He simply lifted his chin, looked at O'Connor, and said quietly, "You'll remember this day longer than I will." The salutes held. The applause rolled. And Marcus walked forward, not as a suspect, not as a criminal, but as a man whose dignity could not be chained. For O'Connor, humiliation had shifted. He was no longer the enforcer, but the exposed. His arrogance lay bare in front of cameras, witnesses, colleagues who no longer shielded him. The look in his eyes was not anger now, it was fear. Because authority can command silence, but it cannot erase truth once it is spoken aloud. On the plane, Marcus sat by the window. The cuffs had been removed, but their bite still lingered on his wrists. Outside, the runway lights blurred into streaks as the plane lifted into the night. He leaned his head against the glass, but sleep refused him. Instead, memories crept in. The battlefield. The roar of gunfire. The weight of Sanchez slung over his shoulder, blood soaking into his uniform. The grit of sand grinding in his teeth as he dragged Miller across the dirt, whispering, "Stay with me. Just stay with me." The dawn rising, painting the desert gold, while 6 men lived to see it only because he refused to leave them behind. For that, they gave him a medal. For that, his name was written in commendations. But medals didn't matter in moments like this. Not when, at home, his skin spoke louder than his service. He closed his eyes, hearing his mother's voice again. "Marcus, the world will try to tell you who you are. Don't argue with them. Show them." That was what he had done. And though the cuffs had scarred his wrists, the salutes had scarred something deeper, the arrogance of a man who believed dignity could be chained. The plane touched down hours later, but the story had already traveled farther than the aircraft itself. By the time Marcus walked into his mother's waiting arms in Atlanta, his name was no longer just ink on a service record. It was hashtags, headlines, and home screens across the nation. Clips from passengers had gone viral within minutes. The moment of silence, the first salute, the cascade of applause, it was everywhere. Shared, reshared, dissected. Some captions said, "This is America." Others said, "This is the America we need." But not all voices were kind. On certain networks, anchors framed it differently. A simple case of mistaken identity. Officer followed procedure, nothing more. Others defended O'Connor outright, painting him as overwhelmed, cautious, just doing his job. The country was split, as it often was. Yet one truth refused to be drowned: Marcus's dignity, his silence, his power in that moment of humiliation turned to triumph. For Officer O'Connor, the fallout was swift and merciless. His badge number leaked online. Complaints resurfaced, cases of profiling, whispered stories of arrogance at the checkpoint. The department scrambled to issue statements, first defensive, then apologetic. 2 days later, O'Connor sat at a long oak table in a disciplinary hearing. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but words seeped out. "Do you deny," a supervisor asked, "that you placed Sergeant Cole in restraints without probable cause?" O'Connor shifted, sweat staining the collar of his shirt. He matched a description. He was acting suspicious. Suspicious how? He didn't answer me fast enough. The words hung there, hollow, pathetic. A silence filled the room, not unlike the silence in the terminal before the first salute. This time, however, no applause followed. Only judgment. His suspension came quickly. His reassignment quietly. His reputation, however, loudly dissolved. Marcus stayed home for days, the blinds drawn. The noise of the world outside, applause, condemnation, debates, felt distant. He wanted silence. But silence was hard to find when the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, senators, veterans groups, old comrades from overseas who hadn't spoken to him in years, even strangers who said his story gave them hope. But the call that mattered most came from a voice trembling with age, yet steady with pride. His mother. "Baby," she said softly, "you carried those men through bullets. And now, you carried yourself through prejudice. You made them see." Marcus swallowed hard. "Ma, I don't want to be a symbol. I just wanted to get on a plane." Her pause was long, weighted. "Sometimes, son, we don't choose the moment. The moment chooses us." Weeks later, Marcus agreed, reluctantly, to speak at a town hall organized by a local veterans group. The auditorium was packed, folding chairs crammed into every corner. Cameras lined the back wall. When Marcus walked onto the stage, the applause was deafening. He raised his hands gently, asking for calm. His voice, when he spoke, carried no bitterness. "I didn't ask to be saluted that day. I didn't ask to be cuffed either. But I know this, every black man in America has felt the weight of suspicion on his skin. What happened at that airport wasn't new. It was just filmed." The crowd shifted. Murmurs, nods. "I wore this country's uniform. I bled for it. But when I came home, I learned the uniform doesn't always follow you. Out of it, you're just another face, another target, another suspect." He paused, his voice tightening. "But dignity doesn't wear off. Service doesn't wear off. Humanity doesn't wear off. And no badge, no arrogance, no pair of handcuffs can take that away." The applause rose like a wave, rolling, uncontainable. As the night ended, Marcus left the crowd with words that would echo long beyond the walls of the hall. If you are outraged by what you saw, don't just share the video. Don't just clap when the salutes come. Stand up when you see injustice at your checkpoint, your street, your school. Don't wait for cameras. Don't wait for someone else to do it. Be the salute. Be the voice. Be the proof that dignity can't be chained. In the months that followed, Marcus found peace not in interviews, not in headlines, but in small moments. Coaching his nephew's basketball team. Laughing with his mother on her porch. Walking into airports again, uncuffed, unshaken, unafraid. And every so often, a stranger would stop him. Sometimes a fellow veteran. Sometimes a TSA agent. Sometimes just an ordinary traveler. They would clasp his hand, look him in the eye, and say, "I saw you. You gave me hope." Marcus never sought the spotlight, but the lesson remained larger than himself. Prejudice had tried to chain him. Dignity had broken those chains. The season had shifted by the time Marcus walked into the cafe near Hartsfield-Jackson. Autumn sunlight spilled through tall windows, catching on the steam that curled up from mugs of coffee. The hum of conversation and clatter of dishes filled the room, but Marcus sat at a corner table, quiet, content. He hadn't expected peace to come easily, but it had. In ways small, quiet, ordinary. He had returned to training young recruits at the community gym, teaching them discipline and self-respect. He'd started volunteering at a veterans shelter, listening more than talking, offering steady presence rather than speeches. Life was simple again. No cameras, no headlines, just days stitched together by purpose. Until the door opened. The bell chimed, and in walked Officer Patrick O'Connor. Not in uniform. No badge. No authority clinging to his chest. Just a man in civilian clothes, his shoulders slumped as if carrying something heavy. His eyes scanned the cafe, landed on Marcus, and froze. For a moment, time folded. The airport, the cuffs, the salutes, all of it rushed back. Marcus felt his pulse quicken, his jaw tighten. But he didn't move. O'Connor hesitated at the door. He could have turned around, walked out, pretended not to see. But he didn't. Slowly, awkwardly, he crossed the cafe floor. When he reached the table, he didn't sit until Marcus gave the slightest nod. They sat across from each other, silence like static between them. Finally, O'Connor spoke. His voice was quieter now, stripped of the arrogance that once dripped from it. "I lost my badge," he said. "Suspension turned permanent. They said my judgment was compromised, that I embarrassed the department." Marcus sipped his coffee, said nothing. "I know I deserve worse," O'Connor added. "But I didn't come here for pity." "Then why?" Marcus asked, his voice steady, calm. O'Connor's eyes flickered. To say, I was wrong. I saw what I wanted to see, not what was in front of me. I thought my uniform gave me the right to judge. But that day, when they saluted you, I realized I was the one being judged. The words hung there, raw and halting. Marcus leaned back, studying him. You didn't just cuff me, officer. You cuffed every man who looks like me. Every boy watching that video who thought, that could be me. O'Connor's gaze dropped. His hands fidgeted on the table. I know, and I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted you to hear me say it. Out loud. Marcus let the silence stretch. Then, slowly, he nodded. You can't undo what you did, Marcus said. But you can decide what you do next. Every day, every place you walk into. You don't wear the badge anymore, but you still carry power. The power to see, or to look away. Choose wisely. O'Connor swallowed hard. He stood, uncertain, then offered his hand. Marcus looked at it for a long moment. Finally, he shook it. Firm. Steady. Without hate, without warmth, just truth. And with that, O'Connor walked out. The cafe meeting wasn't closure. It was a reminder. Prejudice doesn't vanish with one viral video, one hearing, one handshake. But it was proof that arrogance can be cracked, that humility can take root even in unlikely soil. Marcus carried that truth into his days. At the shelter, when veterans spoke of their own encounters with prejudice, Marcus listened deeper. At the gym, when young men trained under his watch, he taught them not just how to fight, but how to stand, how to hold their dignity when the world tried to strip it. And each time he walked through an airport checkpoint, he carried himself tall, not because salutes might follow, but because dignity was his birthright, not a gift someone else could bestow. One evening, months later, Marcus walked again through the same airport. Same terminal. Same fluorescent lights. Same hum of announcements echoing from overhead. But this time, the weight in his chest was different. Lighter. He placed his bag on the conveyor belt, stepped through security. A young TSA agent looked up, froze, then smiled. Sergeant Cole. Marcus nodded politely. The agent straightened, his voice steady. It's an honor, sir. He raised his hand in salute. Just one man, just one gesture. But it was enough. This time, there was no applause. No cameras. No crowd. Just respect. Quiet. Simple. Unasked for, yet freely given. Marcus returned the nod. And as he walked toward his gate, his mother's words echoed again. Don't argue with them. Show them. He had shown them. And he would keep showing them. Until the world no longer needed reminding. The story of Marcus Cole is more than an airport scene, more than salutes, more than headlines. It is about how quickly prejudice can bind, and how powerfully truth can break those binds. It is about the arrogance of authority and the quiet endurance of dignity. It is about the choice each of us carries, not to look away, not to wait for cameras, not to excuse silence as safety. Because injustice doesn't end when one man walks free. It ends when many refuse to let it happen again. So the call is simple, the same Marcus left his town hall with. Be the salute. Be the voice. Be the proof that dignity cannot be chained. Marcus Cole's story proves this. Prejudice can chain the body, but it cannot chain dignity. Authority without humility is empty, but respect echoes forever. If this story moved you, share it, subscribe, and join us as we uncover more unheard evidence. Because justice is not a spectator sport. Be the salute. Be the voice. Subscribe to Unheard Evidence for more cinematic stories of injustice, resilience, and truth.